You're listening to the Author Inside You podcast, a weekly podcast designed to motivate you to finish writing a book, choose a publisher, and build an audience. Keep listening if you're looking to get propelled into the next chapter of your life. And now, it's the Author Inside You podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the Author Inside You podcast. I'm Matt Rafferty.
And I'm Leah Rafferty.
Joining us today is Aran Jane, author of the psychological thriller, The Water Column. Aran is an entrepreneur and lives with his wife in California. Welcome, Aran. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a real pleasure.
So, Aran, you studied chemistry, you were a stockbroker and an entrepreneur, and you certainly lived a very full life. So how did you become an author of a psychological thriller?
Well, let's backtrack a little bit. I studied chemistry in high school and struggled with it because my attention was elsewhere, shall we say. By the time I got to college, I decided, hey, let's tackle chemistry since it was difficult. So that's the extent of my chemistry. I majored in chemistry. I was never a chemist.
Oh, okay.
But I certainly am an entrepreneur. And I'll give you a little bit of background prior to getting into business. I dropped out of high school, actually, to write a book.
Wait, you dropped out of high school to write a book?
Yeah, I did.
Oh.
And I hitchhiked from San Diego up to Portland, Oregon.
Wow.
We were going to head to Alaska and then decided not to, turned around and came home.
It's a long way.
Yeah. And as I was in my bedroom working on my first book, which never got written, by the way, my mother poked her head in and she said, "Hey, why don't you think about joining the Navy?" And that sounded like just a really great idea. I mean, I was 16 years old, and I thought, yeah, I could be a member of the SEAL team.
Wow,
At the time, when I was in high school, we were undefeated, our football team was undefeated. And I was feeling pretty good and pretty athletic, so I thought that was a great idea. So I went down and looked into joining up, and at 17, as long as you have your parents' signature, you can join. So I talked to them about joining the SEAL team, and they said, well, I'll tell you what you have to do, we can't guarantee you a slot for the SEAL team because when you get to boot camp, you have to go through a bunch of physical tests and you have to pass those. But we can tell you that the SEALs work very closely with the submarine fleet. And if you were to enlist in the nuclear power program, you'd not only go in at a higher pay grade, but you'd be right there in the submarines, nuclear-powered submarines, and you'd be able to just slide right over with the SEALs. So being as young as I was, I thought, well, that sounds like a great idea. So I signed up and I waited for my 17th birthday and went in. Now, I'll tell you that my father was a retired Marine Corps officer. Oh. And I had in my in 8th and 9th grade, I went down to Texas, down to the Rio Grande Valley, and I attended the Marine Military Academy down there. Just because I thought it would be a lot of fun. Actually, the advertising said tropical climate. So I actually left Carlsbad, California, and went down to the Rio Grande Valley and getting off the airplane at the Harlingen International Airport. It was like getting hit in the face with a shovel. Yeah. It was so hot and cloying. It was unbelievable.
Tropical.
So, it was tropical, all right. Anyway, getting back to my Navy experience, by the time I got into the Navy, because of my background, they made me the RCPO in boot camp, Recruit Chief Petty Officer. So they put me in charge
17.
At 17.
Wow.
They put me in charge of a 60-man company, and we went through, and I actually finished as company honor man and all that kind of stuff. Everything looked great. And then I tried out for the SEALs, and I qualified in terms of being able to get assigned to basic underwater demolition school. And I started waiting for my orders to go. And unfortunately, at that time, this was in the days when the Navy was downsizing and the Vietnam War was over, and I didn't realize it at the time, but the special warfare operator billet was on the decline. And I got the letter from whatever it was called, Bursars or whatever. And they said that because my billet as a nuclear power person was higher than in priority than the Navy SEAL team that I was not qualified to go. So they passed on me. So my whole reason for going in the Navy went up in smoke. So I got stationed on a aircraft carrier for helicopters. And when we were about 4 miles off the coast of San Clemente Island here in San Diego, I decided, I had been complaining and commiserating with my buddies here for a year and a half about how rotten this is. Now, remember, I was a knucklehead at this time. I was an immature kid and didn't know which end was up. But I decided what I'm going to do is I need to do an act of protest. I think I had seen the movie Gandhi or something. And I decided I was going to jump off the ship.
Oh.
So I jumped off the ship.
Wow.
And this was in the middle of flight ops, and I thought, well, here's what's going to happen. They're going to drop me a line and fish me out. I'll be in, if I'm in for 2 or 3 minutes. So I went off first, and a friend of mine followed me in. We went off the fantail. And what happened is they turned the whole ship around. It started getting smaller and smaller on the horizon.
Oh, my gosh.
We started getting a little bit nervous. Of course, we had somebody that sounded man overboard and threw a life ring to us, so we had something to keep us afloat. But it turns out the fellow that went with me was not a California resident and was not used to the ocean and was not a strong swimmer. So he practically went into shock. But they turned the ship around, and then they set out a motor boats that are side boats. I forget what they call them. But they sent one out to fish us out, and I think the chaplain was with them. And as they hooked me in and brought me over, he said, I'm going to see that you get a commendation for this, because they thought that I jumped in to save this fellow's life.
Oh, my gosh.
and of course, they're, a wiser man would have said, "Hey, I appreciate that." Yes. But like I said, I was young. I told him the truth. I said, "Look, I went over first. This is an act of protest, nonviolent protest, and I made a mistake in joining the Navy, and I was told one thing and given another, and I want out. I need to go to school." So 3 days later, I was out with an honorable discharge.
Wow. That was fast.
Yeah, they didn't waste any time showing me the door, and I ended up going to Indiana University, IUPUI, actually, close to you guys in Ohio.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the beginning of the life experiences that make up all the source material for my writing. So I thought that was an interesting digression for you guys.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
And so how did that eventually turn into writing the book?
The first book, Mondragon, is about a special warfare operator. And, since your listeners are all interested in motivation for writing and everything, I will say that one of the first light bulbs that went off over my head is that all books are written based on source material. And that source material can either be actual events. Take something like Lonesome Dove. Turns out that Gus McCrae and Captain Call were based on Oliver Goodnight and the Goodnight Loving Trail. So that was pretty interesting to me. Historical events, they could be based on books. Take James Joyce's Ulysses. That's based on Homer's Odyssey, and or your own life experiences as source material. And so I kind of approach it as a mixture of all three.
Oh, okay.
And try to weave interesting stories around characters that catch my attention or that are issues that I want to see work out in challenges that I throw at them.
Great. So then when you're writing and you're writing with a character, you're actually thinking of somebody that you know or a combination of people that you know and how that person would react?
That's right. And they say all fiction is autobiographical. So, these are composite characters. They have a little of this and a little of that and a little of yourself and a whole lot of your own sweat, blood, and tears. and you throw things at them and see how they react. Sure.
Do you keep notes about your characters so that you can refer back to them?
I do. And in fact, the preparation for writing is, I think, very important. When you're talking about motivation, there's nothing that expresses motivation more than a kid that's maybe, 7 years old, sitting at the dinner table, and he wants to say something, or she wants to say something, and the parents are talking, and they say, "You wait until Dad's finished speaking, or wait until Mother's finished speaking." And and you just want to say something. That is kind of the motivation that you'd like to sustain while writing a book. It helps to have something to say. Mm-hmm. So in order to have something to say, you have to prepare to do that. And in my case, I outline extensively, and I use a piece of software that I find very helpful as well, and that's Dramatica, which is originally for screenwriters, but I find it's very good in helping develop what they call a grand argument story. The grand argument story consists of 4 through lines. It follows the narrative arc of the main character, the overall story, the impact character or influence character, and then the relationship. And so you work through all those and have all those elements together. And then the final thing I do is, and this is a recent thing, is I do a mind map. If you Google mind maps, there's a nice one for Macbeth, for instance.
Okay.
And you just kind of put in the center of the mind map the name of your book or your work in progress, and then off to the sides around it, you put the protagonist and the plot and the symbolism and just all that stuff that you can think of, and you draw it out as detailed as you can get it. And I find that helps when you're going back in and looking at your first draft, and that could be a first draft of a first chapter or first draft of the first 5 pages. It doesn't make any difference. And to see whether or not you're hitting the points that need to be hit for the book to come to life, for the magic to happen.
So it's sort of like a reference for you to look up and say, am I still on track?
Exactly.
Am I going where I wanted to go? I got you. Okay.
Exactly.
So it's nothing like an outline of following the circle around the mind map. It's just seeing how everything is connected and how it all leads back to the main gist of the story.
That's right. And it helps you keep track of things, keep organized. That's one way to look at it. And it helps you develop the outline. As you're coming through, the outline ideally is a list of scenes where conflict, action, and resolution takes place to move the story forward. The outline ideally can start very, very modestly, but as you progress in it and you have more to say, it becomes more fully developed. Mm-hmm. I have an outline, for instance, for my work in progress now, Whalebones, and it's about 20 pages of an outline.
Wow.
And I use a bulleted format, and I try to mix conceptual ideas with character information and even dialogue to get a gist of what it is that I want to say in that particular chapter, which is an expression of a scene. That's how I work.
Is each bullet point just a chapter, and then under that you have more bullet points?
Each heading is a chapter, and then the bullet points underneath can be a combination of all the things except for the chapter. Whatever is being addressed, whatever I'm looking at. The main character may be dealing with some particular conflict, different elements arise, things happen, scenes change. That's what happens, and I just use a bullet, and the bullets help keep me from going on too long.
I see.
Writers tend to write, and that's the thing you have to learn, is to only say what you need to say, especially when you're doing an outline. You can turn an outline into an encyclopedia real easy if you're not careful.
And then the bullet points, do you rearrange them as you're thinking about how the book is going together?
Sure, that's something that happens, and that's one of the nice things about it. And more to that, there's one more tool I use. I actually use a little program called CardFlow, and it's an electronic or computer-based index cards. And so I find that very helpful for shuffling things around and moving them and deciding, I want this to happen here. Because you can also Google a 3-act structure and see how Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, how they develop with obstacles and crises and inciting incidents and climax of Act 1, climax of Act 2, climax of Act 3, and then, the denouement and all that kind of stuff. So as you're telling your story, you want to see, is this lining up? Do I need to move this over here so that this can be the inciting incident? And if it is the inciting incident, what do I need to add to it to make it more dramatic?
Sure.
It can't just be something that lays there flat. And it might be just the way I'm talking about it. Maybe I need to change the tense here. Or change the situation altogether. Anyway, that's the process.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting, having the Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, and thinking about it that way, because I think a lot of people just sit down and say, I'm going to write a novel, and it's going to start off here, and it's going to kind of go in this direction, and then it's going to end up here, and not really think about it as more of a traditional story.
Well, we've even talked to people who said sometimes they got lost in their own thoughts, like they went off track. So it sounds like your tools really would help people keep their vision on path.
Sure. It can also, for me, it opens up opportunities in seeing what's coming next when maybe I can't see it, when I just have it written in prose on the page. Maybe I need to break it down and analyze it. And as I analyze it, then all of a sudden it throws into stark relief, this needs to happen.
Okay.
Also, because my books tend to be a little on the complex side, I don't want to lose track of a thread and not have it play out the way it needs to play out and resolve. Everything needs to be summed up or to be resolved. So I don't want to lose track of that as I'm laying out the work.
You sound very organized.
Necessity is the mother of invention here.
Well, that's what I was just going to ask. So it seems like you are very organized. At any time, did you feel like, I can't write, this is too overwhelming?
I have to answer that honestly, no. But that doesn't mean that I wasn't overwhelmed when I said no.
Okay.
Sometimes the ability to write fiction is to stand in the fiction you're writing in. Mm-hmm. And not believe the negative rejections or all that stuff, to be as audacious as you can. And audacity, from my brief history that I've given you, is something that I received a generous helping of, I think. And so that helps me power through. When I make my mind up about something, I'm committed. The old saying about the chicken and the bacon, the chicken's involved and the pig is committed. When I sit down to write, I'm committed. I'm going to write, and a book will result. And of course, what I would like to do is use all my life's experience that I have to be able to make that book the very best experience for the reader that it can be. And the most enjoyable experience for me as the writer, because that's a process of discovery too.
I think it's really nice how you know what you want and you want to make it enjoyable for the readers. So have you received feedback from readers?
Oh, absolutely. The two classes of readers, the critics, ranging from Kirkus Review to Blue Ink Review to Forward Reviews.
Wow.
And readers on Amazon. The Water Column was very favorably reviewed in all three of the critical reviewers there. It's on the recommended list for Kirkus.
Excellent.
They called it a smart, offbeat detective story with an entertaining, sinuous plot turn.
Great.
Enthralling, they said. On Amazon, I gave away about 5,000 books, and I'll tell you how I did that in a minute. But I gave away 5,000 books, and I've had 47 reviews. And on Amazon, the most you can get is 5 stars. I got a lot of 5-star reviews.
Great.
The total average out of 47 is 4.6.
Wow.
And some of the things that people said were just wonderful. Going back to my first book, which was Mondragon, I looked at Lonesome Dove as a sprawling epic, and I decided, I want to write a sprawling epic.
Okay.
And I did that with Mondragon, and Kirkus came back and said that readers of Philip K. Dick will find this enjoyable. And they called it an auspicious start for Aran Jane. So,
Jeez, that's fun.
yeah, in reading the forward reviews, which ended, it was a wonderful review, and she said it's a feast for the mind and the heart. And when I was finished reading that review, I had tears in my eyes because it's Mondragon was, when I was using 12-point Times New Roman characters, it was a 600-page book. So
Wow.
A little over 120,000 words, I think. And a lot of effort went into it,
Yeah.
and to say the least, and to have somebody get it so clearly just blew me away. So, I was trying to read it to my wife. She was laying in bed with me, and I just kept choking up. And, it was pretty touching.
Yeah.
So, yes, the answer is yes to your question.
Well, what a great feeling. Well, let's go back to the 5,000 books that you gave away. And how did you do that? And was it worth it?
Well, there's a fellow by the name, I think his name is Mark Dawson, and he has a program that you can purchase, and there's a number of things that he offers you. One is a Facebook marketing thing, another is an Amazon marketing thing, etc. I keyed in on the Facebook ads, and I ran Facebook ads, and I ended up, with his help, from what I learned from his little course that I took, ended up spending 30 cents per lead, which is extremely low. And like I said, I ended up giving away about 5,000 copies. Now, how I did that is initially I did I ran the ad with a direct download from me, and a number of the folks that attempted to download the book said that they had some problems getting it downloaded and everything. So I probably lost a few there because not everybody who's on the internet is technically sophisticated.
Sure.
So, I just ran into that as a housekeeping issue. And then when the book was getting ready to launch, Amazon allows you to give away books free through them for up to 5 days in any given cycle. And I think their cycle is 6 months or something like that. So I did the second half through Amazon. So it split up about 2,500 books on my straight giveaway and about 2,500 books on Amazon. And that was it. But I will tell you that my strategy in doing that, and according to Mark Dawson, what you want is you can't sell from an empty cart. You have to have more than one book. And unfortunately, Mondragon, though there's a mystery at the heart of it, it's not a classic mystery in that sense. It is a science fiction, and in fact, a number of the critical reviews mention that it's packed full with hard science fiction. So you don't get a lot of crossover between those readerships, between mystery readers and sci-fi readers. So now we have the water column, which is a classic gumshoe type of tale. Lila Piper is a private investigator, and she's the one that leads up this series. It's the Lila Piper series. Whalebones is the second book second installment in that series. I understood that I was going to have trouble marketing this just from a one book perspective. After the giveaway period, there was some movement in terms of book sales and that kind of stuff, but nothing to write home about. And my plan at this point, when I'm finished with Whalebones, which should be within the next, I would say, 30 to 45 days, I'm planning on again submitting to Kirkus for their review and Forward and Blue Ink. And Kirkus has what they call a starred review for the very best books that they review, and I'm really gunning for that starred review this time out. I got on the recommended list, so that's good.
Yes.
But better is to get a starred review. It's truly exceptional writing is what they're looking for.
Wonderful. I hope you get it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Say a prayer.
Yes, yes.
So that's my goal, and I'm also looking at working with a PR firm this time out, and I'm also hoping that literary agent can help me find a traditional publisher, because this time out I'd like this to go mainstream publishing. That's a lot on the plate. we'll see how it all plays out. But the first two books have done very well critically, very well reviewed. And I think this next one has a real shot at not only getting some critical acclaim, it's the best writing I've done so far. And I'm hoping that it can help me find a publishing home.
That's great. Third time's the charm, right? So,
exactly right.
Well, I hate to keep going back to the giving away of the 5,000 books, but that's just fascinating to me. You were saying that you need to have something else in your cart when you give something away. So that's the idea of, hey, I really liked Aran's book. Now I'm going to go buy his other book that he has,
exactly.
Right? But you didn't have another book that really satisfied the same, that was really meant for the same audience, correct?
That's correct.
Was it worth giving away the 5,000 books? Do you regret that?
No, I don't regret it at all. I think it's, I have people that have given those reviews, those 47 reviews are priceless as far as I'm concerned. And, it doesn't, when you're dealing with, these are ebooks I'm giving away. I'm not giving away
I understand.
Printed books. Let's make that clear for your audience. That would be an expensive proposition indeed. Right. It's important to build readerships. I think there's an author out there, Hugh Howey. You may have heard of him. He wrote a book called Wool, which is like a subterranean sci-fi book that became a international bestseller. He self-published. And his claim to fame was not only did he self-publish, but when the publishers came after him, looking for him because he was such a wild runaway success, he was able to hang on to his electronic publishing rights and give them the print publishing rights. So that was pretty cool.
Yes.
Hugh Howey said that he gave away 10,000 books to get started. So I don't think 5,000 is extraordinary. I think it's probably middle of the road there. I think you need to prime the pump.
Mm-hmm.
In fishing, you got to chum with bait, to throw some bait in the water.
Right.
But at some point, you have to start charging for the book. People need to be as committed as readers as you are as a writer. And that requires an exchange of value for them to really start talking to their friends. They invested in the book. They're excited about it. They loved it. And by the way, you got to read this.
Sure. Right.
Latest Aran Jane
book.
Right. But you're right. When you have a full cart, you give one away, and those people that loved what you just gave away come back and see that, oh, what else did he write? Oh, well, let me buy that book and read it.
Well, that is true. If you find an author that you really like, you want to keep reading their work. I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Right. Sure. I think it's true with, watching videos on YouTube or listening to music, right? I mean, if you suddenly discover a band, you're like, oh, let me see what other albums or other music they've released in the last 10 years.
Exactly. What you want is you want to go from finding readers to finding fans to finding champions. Mm-hmm. That is a long process for a very small percentage. Lucky few, they can come out with a single book that does it. It might be topical, it hits at the right time with the right whatever, and away it goes. Not typical, and I take a little more pragmatic view. I have confidence that these books will eventually get there. We just keep chipping away.
Great. And we did hear from other authors saying that everything's about timing. But I mean, like you said, the timing could be next week, or 2 months or a year from now. You just never know when things pick up or how things pick up. It's just very interesting, how things do work in the world. Someone could write a wonderful book and it doesn't become popular, and someone writes a book that maybe isn't so great, but somehow it's very popular,
Right. Isn't the series The Girl That Kicked the Hornet's Nest and those, wasn't that published posthumously? I might be mistaken about that, but I know that the Confederacy of Dunces was
I love
published
that.
posthumously.
Yes, that's my favorite book.
Leah's favorite.
Yes. Yeah, I think the author's role here is to do the very best they can, and when they're finished one book and they're on to their next, make it a better book than their previous book. Continually growing and developing in their craft, so that eventually they have some body of work that is truly of merit, and the world will find you.
Right.
I have every confidence in that.
That is great advice.
I go back to what Plato tells us, know thyself. Mm-hmm. I think a writer should seek to know themselves. And in that process of discovery, be able to put that on the page in some form. And that could be anything from fiction to nonfiction. It doesn't make any difference. Have something to say, and then work to make sure that what you're saying comes across as clearly and concisely as it can. And eventually, as you work through it, it may even become artfully said. That's what I would recommend. Really concentrate on what it is you're trying to say, and then work hard at your craft. And that takes time and patience. And just be realistic. Set low goals for yourself, just a few pages a day, and you'll get there.
Right.
Great.
Excellent advice. Well, Aran Jane, thank you very much for joining us today. It's been great speaking with you, and your stories and your advice have been fantastic.
Well, I'm really pleased to have been here. It's an honor, and all the best to everyone out there. And thank you, Matt, and thank you, Leah. Nice meeting you. Hopefully our paths will cross again.
Yes, thank you. It was fun learning about the tools that Aran used to write his book.
Yes, I'm really impressed with how Aran uses tools to keep his writing so organized. It's great advice.
Until next time.
Right on.
Thank you for listening to the Author Inside You podcast with your host, Leah and Matt Rafferty.